Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Nina Olson. I'm Nina Olson, the Executive Director for the Center for Taxpayer Rights. And this is our third tax chat in our series on transforming tax administration. And we've really been focusing on some foundational building blocks for tax administration. Our first tax chat was really just an overview with Charles Rosati, former commissioner of the IRS. And our second tax chat last week was on the IRS budget. And this tax chat is on one of the critical building blocks for tax administration, which is on information technology and the challenges dealing with this. And we have an all-star cast. And I'll start. Dave Hinchman is from GAO, and he is in over IT, and he has recently been the star of a Wall Street Journal article that I think I included in, and I'll certainly post it on our website, talking about IT. And GAO had just come out with a report on the IRS's legacy systems, and we'll talk a bit about what legacy means and some of the systems involved. We have Fred Forman, and Fred is the former IRS Associate Commissioner of Business Systems Modernization. He came in with Charles, and he is now working on Shrink the Tax Gap, among many other things. He's been consulting with state departments, taxation, and things like that. And then we have Marina Nitze, and she is former Chief Technology Officer for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And she too has been very involved in government projects, particularly on making applications user-friendly and how you manage. All folks have been involved in how you manage, very significant projects, which I would say is an understatement for what the IRS has. So I'm going to let each of these folks make opening remarks, and then we're going to move to really the part of our conversation where we're going back and forth. Everyone, you can put comments in the chats, questions in the chats. I'll be monitoring and bring them into the conversation as we go along. And if we have time at the end, we can let people ask questions as well. So who wants to go first in their opening? Fred wants to. Great.
Well, I'm prepared. I might as well take advantage of being prepared. Thanks, Nina. I'm pleased to be here and looking forward to the conversation. The strategic operating plan, it's a big step in the right direction. It sets out a detailed picture of what the IRS needs to do to transform itself into a modern, high-tech customer service organization. It's comprehensive, covering taxpayer services, enforcement, technology, and staffing. It provides a time sequence set of milestones for the transformation. It defines many, maybe too many, indicators of whether the transformation is on schedule. It provides near-term staffing and funding requirements, avoiding, correctly in my opinion, the trap of getting into too much detail in an uncertain future. It mentions all the right caveats about how the plan will evolve in the future and promises to keep stakeholders informed along the way. It makes clear that technology can be successfully deployed now for better taxpayer service and enforcement without fully modernizing its ancient legacy core systems, though to completely transform itself, that modernizing the legacy systems is a critical element. I would also mention that all of the technology we need is available today, though rapid advances in generative AI may open new possibilities. I have two major general concerns and one somewhat more specific concern. The general concerns are, first of all, are they promising too much in the early years? There are almost 150 milestones in just FY 23 and 24. Granted, many of these are projects that are underway and others are kind of soft, like starting to plan something. But even so, that many would seem to be in direct contrast to the under-promise and over-deliver mantra for perceived success. So A very heavy dose of prioritization is urgently needed to keep the plan from going off the rails in even the first 12 to 18 months. My second general concern, and this is widely discussed in every one of these ones that talks about it, is there's some serious funding allocation issues. There are reasons why the IRA funding allocation is the way it is, but unfortunately, it is not what the IRS needs to deliver the envisioned transformation. As just one example, the taxpayer services funding will run out in year 4 or 5, hitting a cliff, as Ursula Gillis mentioned last week. As another allocation issue, Congress has already eliminated some funding, business systems modernization in FY23 from the IRS's regular appropriations, saying they can make it up from the IRA funding. The IRS must still keep the lights on while undertaking the transformation. Moving funding from transformation to routine operations will negatively affect the success of the transformation. My last point is that I have some concern about much of Area 4, which is the IT area of the plan. And I'm concerned that it needs to more strongly, I think, reflect that the technology needs to be in what I call in service to the business needs. We all know that it is too easy for the technology specialists, and chuckle, I'm one of them, to kind of just get caught up in our own thing. So I think, that linkage needs to be more clearly in the plan. So those are my comments. Thank you, Nina and Dave.
Those are really great comments, Fred, and I think we want to explore a lot of what you said there in the rest of this conversation. So Marina, Dave, who wants to go? Marina.
I go next. So I'm a little bit of an outsider here because I was Chief Technology Officer of the VA. I was not at IRS. But when I joined there in 2013, I think I did not imagine a mere 10 years later, the VA being such a success story. And I hope that it has some lessons for IRS in this work. VA veteran trust has gone up since 2014, 26%, which is pretty amazing. And my original vision when I joined as Chief Technology Officer in 2013 was that veterans could apply for, manage all their benefits in one place. And VA has 83 benefit lines. And at the time, we had over 1,500 websites. We had more legacy mainframes than we know what to do with. And we're also the largest healthcare system in the world, right? So, but VA has come a tremendously long way. And a lot of that was because we didn't try to boil the ocean. And I think, echoing what Fred said, some concerns here would be trying to do too much all at once, rather than getting a baseline and really building the muscle of how to make change. And absolutely what Fred said, building the muscle of how IT works with the business. Technology by itself does not really solve problems. My day job these days is I run an incident or crisis response firm called Layer Olive. And so we did things like help turn around the unemployment claims backlog in California during the pandemic. And we see the same mistakes made over and over and over with our clients. Is the thing they tried to do was rip and replace the mainframe or do a 15-year modernization project, when the thing they really should have done is spend 6 or 8 weeks building a really great claim status tracker, or spend 6 or 8 weeks observing people trying to file for a dependent and making that experience better on the business side and on the technology side. So I think this is an awesome opportunity for the IRS. And I hope that they start small, they under promise and over deliver. So Dave, happy to hand it to you.
Great, thank you. Great to be here today. Thanks for having me, Nina. I really appreciate the invitation. I think this discussion is coming at a really important time for the IRS. For those of you who didn't catch it, I work for the Government Accountability Office, so I'm an auditor. We are a nonpartisan legislative branch agency, and we do performance audits on the federal government at the request of Congress. In my portfolio is IRS IT modernization, and so we have been looking at this issue for a long time, and we have a lot of reports. This past January, we issued our first report taking a deep dive at what legacy IT means to IRS and what that legacy picture looks like. And IRS, to its credit, I think was pretty aware of what they have that's old, outdated, needs to be replaced. But I don't think anyone had ever really brought together the overall message and sort of all the data together into one place and really painted a picture of what the IT enterprise looks like at IRS. And then you combine that with the $80 billion from the IRA, and I think the timing is good. I view it as IRS being a kind of an inflection point. For years, they've asked for people and resources, and well, now they've got both. And so now it's time to put the pedal to the metal and to demonstrate that they have a plan for what they're going to do, that they want to modernize, and that they can successfully see this through down the 8 to 10 year time frame.
You know, that actually raises something, and I'm going to go to Fred on this one, although Dave, you may have something to say about it. You know, at the time that you came in, the IRS had just burned through $4 billion on you know, a modernization project that even when I was up on the Hill in 2019, when you'd raise the IRS needs money for IT, you'd have people saying, yeah, well, we gave them $4 billion back in so-and-so and they blew it. You know, so they're really long memories. I mean, what did you find? What did you see with that, you know, is important lesson for today, now that you've got this money, that past experience?
Well, thank you for that. And I think that the first thing is that one of the things people puzzle over is how you can spend that much money and still not, you know, get some kind of solution in place. And as one of the things I want to compliment Dave on in his report is that, and I'm sure Marina knew this from her work, it's not just the system you're replacing. I mean, if you could just kind of fly in from outer space and drop in a new, you know, legacy, you know, a new core accounting system, that would be wonderful. But honestly, the number of tentacles that grow over time with this kind of legacy system kind of makes it harder and harder to replace, because you not only have to replace sort of the central guts, but all the interconnections. And I think one of the things that's in the GAO report is how you not only have to have a plan for how you build a new engine, you have to have a plan for how you replace it and all the piece parts that depend on it. And I think that that's at the heart of why things are so hard. And frankly, Dave, I had a chuckle in the report where it said that they've been working on it for a decade. Dave, I was there more than 2 decades ago when they were working on it, and they were working on it before I got there. And it's just because it's hard. It's big, it's hard. It has millions of taxpayers and so forth. But the thing when I got there was they were trying to do too much. They had, the modernization budget was hundreds of millions of dollars more than it was. And they had too many major projects in flight at the same time, which was a strain not just on the internal IT resources, but frankly on the business. And on, you know, and it was just too much. And that's in fact why I said that I'm so concerned about how many things they're setting out as their priority now. So that was the past. They'd spent a lot of money. They had a number of false starts along the way. Even frankly, what I was doing there was turned out to be a false start, even though we eventually did do some processing outside of the legacy system, but it turned out not to have the long-term structure, let's just say. And since I left, they've actually had at least 2 or 3 more runs at how to do this. From what I hear, there's some good progress being made, but is, again, referring to Dave's report, they still aren't predicting that they can completely replace the system until 2030 or sometime later, which, by the way, is not quite what the SOP says, but
They accelerated it.
well,
So let's talk about what some of these systems are. What is, you know, we're going to throw around acronyms, but we've got IMF, which is Individual Master File. We've got BMF, which is Business Master File. We've got IDRS, the Integrated Data Retrieval System. There's something called CADE, well, CADE, and then CADE 2, which replaced CADE. And then we've got something called Enterprise Case Management System, which is ECM. So Dave, do you want to take a stab at what each one of those things are so everybody in the audience can understand what we're talking about?
So I will do this
I'm taking
in
notes.
an overly,
Yeah.
this is going to be overly simplified, because really, you know, I think to Fred's point that there are tentacles and connections to all of these systems. I think, you know, the individual master file, which for the easiest way for me to remember it, this is where our personal taxes get processed. And it's the single most authoritative source for that information. So as you might imagine, that is a very important system for IRS. It is currently about 60 years old. It was literally being built when we had the Apollo program active and we were sending manned missions to the moon. And the efforts to replace it have been longstanding and fraught with fits and starts, as Fred also pointed out. The business master file is the equivalent of the individual master file, but for businesses. I think the other one you mentioned was the IRS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm less familiar with that one. Fred, you may know that. But the case management system is literally how your tax return is accessed as it moves through the system. If you have a dispute, if the IRS thinks you need overpayment, this is what links all of these various disparate systems together so that the adjuster or agent, whoever's handling this, can pull your information and have that information available when you call or whether you have a meeting with the IRS. And it's actually a little more complicated than that, but I think for today's purposes, it captures the essence.
Yeah.
And especially, I think, I'm glad you brought up the case management system. That is something they have also struggled with modernizing.
Right.
It's been also longstanding, making progress, but still some room to go on that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
similar story of, sort of going down a couple of wrong paths, but hopefully worked out. Getting the point I want to make, which Dave didn't quite land on, but which you might say, well, what the heck? Why do they have one? It's because the individual master file, which is the authoritative, record for your your individual account, it's a sequential file. It's processed sequentially. If you're there long enough ago, you could watch the tape drive spinning. And that in and of itself, just that one simple fact creates enormous stress when you're trying to do things online, because you have to take extracts. And that means when you're looking at an extract, you're not looking at the real thing in real time, like you are almost certainly when you're talking to Bank of America or Amazon or anybody, so I mean, that's what leads to all these extracts to create the user interfaces, whether it's on the user side or whether it's on something you can see online on the website, like where's my tax return. This one simple fact drives a huge amount of the complexity, and from everybody's point of view, from a internal usage point of view and from a external taxpayer point of view.
So where does IDRS come in with that? The integration
of the extract files that supports the customer service people.
Okay, so it pulls information in,
Yeah.
and then it's available to the customer service.
Right. And it pulls it. I think in most cases, most of them actually pull daily. So it's close, but if you make a change or have an agent make a change and then go back in 5 minutes later, that change will not be there. It might not be there till a day or two later.
So maybe you want to articulate, because some folks have asked, what is a sequential file? It's that. Can you explain that a little bit better, since that seems so important?
Well, it means it means that if I'm taxpayer number 1027 and you want to get to my record, just to my record, you have to span through the first 1026 to get to the 1027th, as opposed to direct access where you can go right in and get my record. But that means that changes the entire structure of everything that flows from it.
I just have to say my personal experience when we were talking about enterprise case management, we started in the Taxpayer Advocate Service in about 2010 to replace our case management system. And we had a separate one because we needed to keep our files, our cases separate and confidential from the rest of the IRS. And it was built on an Oracle platform that was no longer going to be supported at some point in the future. So that was kind of critical. And we worked with IT, we built all our business requirements and everything. We were very ambitious, but we knew we'd do these in flights and in installments. And what we learned, part of what we wanted to build was that there are 60 different case management systems in the IRS. And what we were pulling from, because we had cases from every single part of the IRS, was we needed to have access and pull data from all 60 of those case management systems. And the most complex thing for us to do was not so much build what was going to be the receptacle, our case management system, but building to every single one of those other case management systems. It wasn't like one piece of programming was going to work for all of them. We had to program them separately to all 60. And, eventually what happened was that the IRS, and I want to talk about this because this comes up, Dave, in your report, the IRS put a pause on all new projects when Affordable Care Act and FATCA were passed, because they needed to move resources from all projects that were going on except for submission processing and certain other projects, to take those resources, those IT resources, and put them on the ACA requirements and the FATCA requirements. So our process, which was 60% built, was stopped, never was picked up. It got rolled into enterprise case management. So, we started in 2010, here we are in 2023, and we still don't have enterprise case management. And we have a suspension now. You mentioned in your report that there are 6 systems that are suspended now, and one of them is CADE 2. And isn't CADE 2 supposed to be a replacement for IMF or a part of that?
Yeah, it was. It's part of CADE 2, so not CADE 2 in its entirety. But that was one of the concerns we had. The departmental leadership made the decision to reallocate, or excuse me, agency leadership made the decision to reallocate these resources, leaving the CIO shop with no choice but to suspend these 6 key initiatives, several of which were related to replacing the individual master file. And I think that's a concern. And I think, we haven't talked to IRS yet about their new standard operating, or excuse me, the strategic operating plan. But I think we're curious to see how those initiatives are rolled into the plans they have for the next few years. One of the things Nancy Seeger, the previous CIO, concern she mentioned was that, when you stop a project, it's not just you throw money at it again and restart it. You lose the people, they move on to other things. And so it takes a lot of time and effort to get an initiative back up and running. And I would presume that some of that is built into the SOP and how they're going to approach those initiatives. But until we actually talk to the IRS about it, we won't know for sure.
The other thing that I wanted to say about the ACA and the FATCA funding was, and we are seeing patterns of this, Fred, you mentioned that BSM was zeroed out because you got this other money, is that Congress passed ACA and FATCA, but then in the appropriation gave the IRS no money to implement it on modernization, and in fact said you can't use any of this year's, you can't use our money that we're giving you this year to implement this. So they basically took user fees to pay for staffing, which had been paying for other things, to allocate that. And you see those kinds of, shuffling the shells, and the three-handed card, it's just really hard for the service to be handling all of that.
Say, Nina, there's actually an example, in my opinion, within the IRA itself. I personally read everything, but just looking at some of the charts in the SOP itself, you can see that basically within the IRA is $500 million for what they call energy initiatives. And I guess that's all the stuff around EV credits and stuff like that. Yet when they do their plan, they actually indicate that they think it's going to cost about $2.9 billion to do that. So right there's an example of $1.4 billion, that's I'm not arguing good or bad exactly, but you can see that right away here's something even within the IRA itself that is not funded to the extent that's needed to actually deliver it.
So, Marina, you've obviously worked in an agency and was in charge of technology for an agency that was really peddling from behind. So tell me what you really had to do there to get it moving, and what you focused on first.
Yeah, I think we had two things to really focus on first. And some of it was the benefit of constraints, frankly, because so much of our budget was to keep the lights on, that at the end of the day, while we had, I think, $4.6 billion annual IT budget at the VA, again, it was, you know, keeping the MRI machines on, keeping our EHR on. It wasn't necessarily for innovations. And so something that myself and my team focused a lot on was, what is the end user experience? What is the experience of veterans? And veterans are not one block, same as taxpayers are not one block of people, right? There's quote unquote personas. And really spent time understanding what their experience was with the VA, where were their biggest pain points. And then we tried to find what was the simplest possible way to address that pain point. And I think, Nina, you said you had a couple of videos. A transformative moment for me at the VA was when we were on the front page of the New York Times for an IG report that there was about 800,000 pending paper applications from veterans who were trying to enroll in VA healthcare. And then IG estimated 100,000 of them died waiting to get into our healthcare system, which is unforgivable. And the VA was going to do what it always did, how we solved every problem, which was more mandatory overtime. We're going to have more people type faster into the mainframe. That's what's going to work. And I was pitching, what if we had an electronic application? And what it turned out that we did have an electronic application, but only 8 veterans had ever used it. And by way of context, there's about 20 million veterans in America. So 8, I'm not saying 8 million, I'm saying 8. And VA was like, well, the data shows obviously that veterans don't use the internet. And I just did not believe this, but going into the boardroom and having an emotional battle wasn't really going to work. And so we went out and we sat, and with their permission, we recorded veterans trying to enroll in VA healthcare. And, you know, long story short, we had an online application and it didn't work. It required such an old version of Internet Explorer and such an old version of Adobe Acrobat that we actually, like, there was only one computer that we could ever find anywhere that would actually load it at the cost of millions of dollars a year. So I don't mean to laugh. I mean, this was a deeply harmful thing. And then because we had the pressure of this crisis, we were able to launch a form on a website that loaded on your phone. It didn't have at the time a login, although we since put ID.me on it and made it more secure. At the time, it was literally a form. And we went from 8 veterans to 2 million veterans enrolling in VA healthcare instantly from their mobile phones. And then we were able, now we had, you know, a form and a template and a way to collect information. And then for other benefit lines, we were able to slowly build on top of that success, such that now you can manage and apply for most of your 83 benefits at va.gov today. So really highlighting, but what the key to that was highlighting this one veteran, Dominic, for 2 minutes, recording his experience, took off. I mean, that was like a viral video across the White House, across VA leadership. And I think that's a lesson the IRS could definitely take, which is don't try to boil the ocean, listen to taxpayers, find one problem. I almost want to say any problem, but certainly there's some high level ones, like having to file on paper for a dependent, direct file, you know, your get transcript, which definitely feels like you're in the 1980s when you download it and it looks like it was typed on a typewriter. Pick one of those experiences. And even if it's starting with plain language content that looks nice and loads on your phone, that can be transformative and something that you can keep building on.
Well, let's take a look at Dominic. How about that? I just think this is worth watching. So this is the first instance of Dominic.
No, I've been to.
And also veterans told us the very last thing that they wanted was to be contacted by the VA the day that they separated. That was not an experience that they wanted. They wanted it to be left alone for a little while, and then they wanted to engage with us. And so we looked at, can we have a consistent font and a design as one baseline? Can we have a rethink push pull? I get the IRS is a little bit different, where I think nobody would opt into getting an audit letter, but at the same time, can it? I've actually challenged a few colleagues of mine at the IRS. I was like, hey, can you change the font so it doesn't look like it was typewritten in 1981 as just a baseline part of building our change muscle? On a
dot matrix printer?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that changes the experience too, as you have people read those letters and interact with them. And so I think that you have to consider the taxpayer's experience in totality. And part of that too is, most people want to interact online. Most people do not actually want to call. And I would definitely be in that camp. If I'm calling you, something has gone horrifically wrong and I'm angry about it every minute. But some people do want to call and some people do need to call. And I think that a lot of times we miss the forest for the trees in that argument. Like you want to have some phone support, but you can't. I don't think that it should be a goal to make your phone support 10 times as large if instead you could make your self-service support actually work. And like Fred's point about status tracking, that's a strangler pattern I've seen successfully work time and time and time again, that get people want self-service. And even if they can only sync back, once a night, it's still a market improvement over waiting on hold for 8 hours only to discover that the person answering the phone has the exact same information that you do. That's a terrible experience for everybody. And if instead we can make, and I've seen status trackers, really nice ones stood up in weeks, that hook off a CSV exported from a mainframe. They do update once a day, but at least they can handle people compulsively refreshing them all day. There can be kind of creative ways to log in and do a claim status tracker. So that would be something I think could be a huge bang for the buck. And even looking at like California with the claim status tracker there, it took them 3 weeks to stand one up. And that was 99% of the reason people were calling, assuming anybody could get through because they were only answering less than 1% of phone calls. And that was a tremendous positive news story, positive claimant experience for less than $1 million in 3 weeks.
That's just really remarkable. And I've never quite understood why it is that, where's my refund could not give better information. I know that there are people in the IRS that want very much for that to happen. But it just seems to me that if people could, people are like going there, like you're hitting the elevator button, you're checking it multiple times a day. But even if you were just checking it once a day, if you're getting the same message from one day to the next, and it's just saying, we're processing your refund, check back in 24 hours, check back in a week, that there's nothing more than that, that's going to drive them to the phone. And to me, it's just, that's an easy win, at least conceptually. And maybe there's something that none of us know, or that and I don't know, that's stopping them from giving more information. And I'd say the same thing with, when returns are rejected, the amount of information that you can give. And we'll get into some of that issue about e-file, but it just, that's just an easy thing. The other thing I'd say, and I drive everybody crazy about this, but near my last, annual report, I proposed something called the Taxpayer Anxiety Index, because it just seemed to me that, taxpayers are, to your point, they'd be very happy going to the app first, and if the app solves their problem, that's great. They don't have anxiety, they know where they're going. But even as Dominic showed, he tried and tried and tried, got stuck. What did he do? He picked up the phone. And, and so at that point, that's where you do your planning on your staffing. You actually put yourself in the shoes of the taxpayer and you walk through thousands of scenarios, well, hundreds of scenarios, and you see where things get screwed up and where people's anxiety is increasing. They're not getting the information they need. And then you have to say, is that information that I can actually give them in an electronic format, in a self-service format, or is this where I need to staff the phones and be ready for those people? And you could really map out all your streams of work in that way. From the perspective of the taxpayer, there's a point like in collection, they'll try to do an online installment agreement, but the dollar amount's too high, that clutching feeling makes them be like, okay, I need to talk to somebody, and you want to talk to somebody in that example, and so staff for that and build the front end, to meet those needs that can really be addressed in self-service environment. But you have to do the analysis of that, and you have to do it from the taxpayer perspective, and then overlay what the limitations may be. Like I say, why is it that that the system can't say your return is here in wage verification, and it's going to take several weeks until we hear the following, and there's nothing you need to do. Sorry. I mean, that may not make people happy, but at least it's more information than they're getting now.
If I may, a challenge I've seen consistently there, and I'm imagining it's a challenge with the IRS too, although again, I'm not inside, is that the internal business flows and systems are not all in one place. I definitely remember in California, to get the claim status tracker working, we had to interview maybe 60 different teams, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, say, what does area code 004 mean? Because they were very, very segmented. And because it was nobody's job internally to see that holistic view, it was very, very difficult to do it without somebody's mandate being go around, figure out what all the codes mean, and then figure out what to do next. Because to your point, you don't want the message to say, we're processing your return. That's not helpful. You test that with a user and they're just going to hit refresh again or call. If it says, we need form 007 back from you, that's different. And to your point too, about really mapping out the processes and where people are getting stuck, a great win, and I credit my friend Dave Guarino for starting this on Get CalFresh in California, and he's since done it in lots of places, is it's currently a federal government mandate to use Google Analytics on your websites. It's part of the digital analytics program. Put that up on your error pages and see where people are getting stuck. And that can be a tremendous source of information that you otherwise would not have. That is, nothing is technically free in federal government, but like that is actually free. Or you want to get more sophisticated, you bring in like a medallia and you can actually see where people are rage clicking on a website. And then you can start prioritizing. If lots of people are rage clicking on a particular help page, then you can say, okay, let's focus on making this at least clearer language. Clearly it's something about it isn't working. Let's figure out really rapidly what's not working there.
Okay, that's a new term for me and I love it. And I'm just, I love it. Rage clicking.
It would go with your anxiety index, I think, very
I'm,
well.
I'm incorporating it in to the theory.
Yeah.
So Fred or Dave, where would you start? In
I would, well, if I were king of the world, I would have 2, possibly 3 things I would really focus on. The first is, and to the discussion that Marina was just having, I think some of the stuff is kind of no-brainers. I mean, I'm not against analytics and I'm not against user, forums and stuff like that, but some of it's simply a no-brainer, which is to give people multiple channels to reach you. And, and you're right, the phone is in a way the worst one because it probably takes the most. But anyhow, the IRS, look, has lots of, I'll call them pilots and experiments underway, some actually out there for exchanging information by email, allowing attachments, to be, or documents to be, set up or sent back and forth or whatever. And even some pilot scanning programs for the paper. I mean, to me, the first track would be finish that stuff, focus on finishing it, getting it out, making it accessible, making it available, and getting multiple channels to, frankly, let people choose what channel they want to use to get to you. The second thing I would do is I would have a, look, I mean, even though you can do an awful lot in customer service and even in enforcement activities without getting the master files converted, it's just time to do it. I mean, they just, they got to create some kind of war room or something, and just not let people get diverted or not. They just, and I'm really worried that this is where the funding allocation mismatch with what they need to do may strike. Initially, it'll strike in customer service because the service funding is way low, but the modernization, the IT funding isn't exactly humongous either, if you consider doing the IMF and the BMF and all the linkages and all that. So, but let me just say, I mean, I think, again, if I were king of the world, I would definitely just put an all-out push and just not let anybody lose their focus on getting, and I wouldn't even let the BMF be the focus. I would just, I would say, okay, make that later or something like that. So I would do those 2. And the third thing is the data analytics. I don't think they're going to be able to get to any kind of efficient auditing or efficient selection, even for auditing, or efficient, interactions without way better use of data that they have and so forth. And that's where the data analytics comes in. So things like, Nina, you've talked about it, and it's almost a no-brainer. I mean, the number of no change audits, it's crazy. It's a waste of everybody's time, and there just seems to be so much more that could be done. And so to me, it's like, just take the things that are in flight and making progress and focus on them, number 1. Number 2, focus on getting, I would just even be very specific, the IMF completed, And third, really get the data analytics work. And by the way, I would just say that there's a lot of front end work. Just hiring a bunch of auditors to me is like almost crazy, because they'll have the old systems and the old issues to deal with, and they'll divert the people who are doing the audits. I would just cool the jets a little bit on the over hiring or trying to ramp up the people side too much till you really got the information structure side, sorted out. And I think that's going to take some time.
That's something that yesterday there was a program with Charles Rosati was being interviewed. And one thing he said on this data analytics side and the enforcement side was, slow down on the hiring of that and hire your experts, hire your people who can really pull together. What is it you're looking at? What should you be looking at? That will define who you need to hire to do the audits. You really need to have a better understanding of what's out there. And everybody in the room all agreed, we don't know. We have indications, but we really don't know. And that's where you really need to work with the data that you've got on hand and what else you could get in. And you've got all this information from FATCA that nobody's doing anything with because this data doesn't translate and it can't get into our systems. You don't have a case management system for FATCA. So you're using manual selection. That's just a real challenge. Don't go hiring people now. To hire the right people to look at all that stuff and whatever you need in IT to make that data manageable in a reasonable way. Yeah. Dave, where are you? What would you do?
At the risk of beating an issue completely dead, I think that one of the IRS's largest challenges stems from its customer service, as we've been talking about. When a taxpayer calls in and the customer service rep doesn't have the information that they need or interested in, or they only have what they received in a very vague letter, and they're desperate for more. And I know that touches on a lot of the different efforts that IRS has in terms of modernization, getting systems to talk to each other. And I think this is their focus. I think, looking at some of the comments that Mr. Werfel's made since his confirmation, I think he's very focused on that. I think he's very focused on getting rid of the legacy IT that IRS has. And I think that's all just part of the process. It sounds to me that at least IRS recognizes they could be serving the public better, and that they're looking for ways to actively do that, which I think is great. And I think I certainly support.
Yeah.
I'll mention one other thing because it's kind of fun. It's not funny, but it's kind of, funny. But is Marina's comment about the letters that you can't understand. And, you've made this point many times. So the question is, why can't they write a letter? You can understand what the heck it says. And why does it have to look like they wrote it on a typewriter in 1980? This is actually, again, I don't have any insider information, and so my data is a couple decades old, but this is one of the things that's embedded in the assembly language and COBOL generated from their ancient systems. And guess what? It's not so easy to go in and make them look like, like you just had a nice interaction with ChatGPT. And so just even things that seem easy, or what you might call low-hanging fruit, I guess is a good term. They aren't. They're not low-hanging, and they're not fruit. It's embedded, and it's just part of untangling this thing. I once saw, when I first came, I saw a map of these entanglements, but I'm sure it's only gotten much worse. And believe me, you can look at that thing and you just say, you'll never figure out how to untangle that. And
we called our systems map at the VA Frankie. For Frankenstein, even though it's Frankenstein's monster and Frankenstein's doctor. But yeah, it was just absolutely insane. And it was like size 2 font, and it was.
Yeah, so just having, that's one of the benefits of the IRA, is having the long-term funding to hire people and have them know and have them there and have them dedicated. So there's not whipsawing. In fact, Dave's example is a perfect case. So something else came along, and and by the way, I should also mention another complication. If I were in business, or if I had my own business, if I were king of the world or whatever, I would say no new requirements for 3 years, right? So then I have a stable target. I know what I'm shooting at, and I can really do. But guess what? Here they have the IMF, and here they have CAID. Well, and guess what? Look at the IRA itself. It's a bunch of new tax. They have to maintain currency with the tax laws, which change a lot sometimes, every year. And so they're actually shooting at kind of a moving target. Commissioner Rosati always gave the example he said it's like changing the engines on a 747 while it's in flight.
Yep.
I mean, really, I'm actually think it's a miracle the IRS achieves what they do. I just want to say that I'm in absolute awe. I'm in absolute awe that they get through the filing season every year. It's a miracle to me. So, we spend our time here sort of saying what they haven't been able to do, but I mean, the truth is what they do is amazing. It's totally amazing to me.
Well, I think just the economic impact payments,
Yep.
and advanced child tax credit was, I just kept saying it's a miracle. It was just a miracle that they got it done. I think, for me, one of the things that would be on my wish is the notice that you would pull out correspondence by its roots, if you could find its roots, and, do something else, because, it wasn't for people wanted to make changes to letters. The employees hated using that system. And yet that was the system you have to use. And, it would take a year to get just a paragraph change in a letter, redesign a letter. Oh my God. And it wasn't like people there were always disagreements about what letters should look like, but you could get a consensus. But then once you got the consensus, it would still be a year before you could actually see it. And by that point, maybe something had changed, like your point is. I do want to, we had a question about what do all these cautions mean for the online taxpayer count? So I asked the same question. I was in Australia about 10 days ago, and I was meeting with the deputy, it's called the second commissioner in Australia, but I was meeting with the deputy commissioner. And I asked him, well, if you were to give Danny Werfel some advice, what would you tell him to do first off? And he said, get an app. And so, and what he meant by that was get an accessible online account like you were talking about, Marina, where people could. So they actually sent me what their app for their taxpayers looks like and what they can do on the app, which is accessible by phone and everything. And it's a demo thing. And I'm going to try to do this again and share it with you so you can see what at least one tax agency has done. And let me see if I can find it here. Here it is. Let's see what it looks like. Can you all see this? Yes. All right. So this is basically the app, and they call it lodgements. That's what you do when you file your return. So here you are. It was based, this app was done for 2022. So you can actually just hit a button to start preparing your income tax return. But you can view your income statement. So all your 1099s, your W-2s, everything's in there. Look how easy it is to update your bank details. Just click this, manage your tax returns. They didn't have any tax returns in there. Find your payment reference number. If you've made a payment, you can update your contact details. They have their retirement savings. There are various retirement accounts that that's what they call superannuation. And if you've got different ones, you have multiple, fees relating to them. So they've even got like a little helpful tip, like, why don't you consolidate your superannuity accounts so that you only pay fees for one thing? So let's go to prepare your return. And this is slowly loading. Retrieving your pre-filled details, ahem. Okay, check your contact details below. This is where you look at how you want to be approached. And since this is part of the tax account, is part of their MyGov account, which is for the entire, like if you had VA benefits, you'd get to it through your MyGov account. If you were getting food stamps, you'd get to it through your MyGov account. Everything is accessible through this. So you've got your email information, your postal address. Now we'll move on to the next screen. Financial institution. This is where you want your money to be put in. You can update it in real time. Okay, were you an Australian resident? Yes, this is their year. Did you have a spouse? No. Did you use the My Deductions tool? You can use this to figure out whether you put in any deductions during the year, you wanted to say you had a child in advance, whatever it was. Then you get into the details, and they've got little video tutorials, also stuff for the COVID measures. Okay, here's where you get to put in income. We know you received this. Did you, or you're saying you received this? Yes, I received salary. You had interest and dividends and other things. Were you a sole proprietor? You had deductions you want to claim, work-related expenses, etc. Here's some information about the sharing economy. You know, you need to report that. And you need to put it on the return. And they have a little reminder about cash income too, in case you might forget that cash income is also taxable. All right, prepare your return. We pre-fill your information. They've pre-filled it, and you can see what it looks like. You can add and edit. Add and edit. Deductions, they're not provided, so there you need to add and edit, and they're prompting you. Did you have any work from home? So there you go. So here are your income tests to see if you were qualified for any of these things. Now, in this IRS's strategic operating plans, they're talking about, you know, in the filing process to be able to prompt taxpayers that you may be eligible for such and such a benefit, like you've reported income that makes you qualified for the earned income tax credit as a, you know, as a childless worker. This would be the area where you are actually making these suggestions, and you can edit. They're, you know, they're showing some things that you might be eligible for. And then how did you prepare the return? Myself, tax help volunteer. Will you need to lodge in future years? I'm not sure. Or is this my final? You can calculate. And they come back and they say you get a refund. It'll be paid into account Joan White. If this is not correct, update it. And this estimate may change because obviously we have audits and we're looking at things and just whatever, and the receipt will be sent here. If that's not correct, update your details. Here's your jurat, your penalties of perjury. And then you tick that to sign with the identification details that you needed to lodge on, that you signed to get onto MyGov, and then you lodge, and it's just saying, oh, you need to sign the bottom, which we don't need to do. So that's it. That's their return. Now, it's not spiffy. It doesn't have bells and whistles or all those sorts of things, but it's making available to someone. And there are 30 million taxpayers in the United States that are plain vanilla, just income, you know, no children, no earned income credit. They could very easily do that. And at the same time, you can also, because you can get your income statements, you can download that information and share it with other preparers, other tax professionals, if you don't want to do it on this account. So when the commission,
I used to live in the Netherlands. They had something similar.
Yep.
They basically sent you a bill.
Yep. It's not hard. So
well, it is hard.
Well, it is. Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
It is hard here.
But
it's very hard here.
It can be done. And I think what I do see in the, I personally see in the strategic operating plan is that, you know, they've identified building block pieces. You know, they've said, we're going to make taxpayers' income items, you know, their information returns accessible to them. You know, so you should be able to get onto your online account and you can see that. They've also said it could be downloadable. You know, it would be wonderful if they're shared with other software products. If you have complicated or you just want to go and use another software product, fine, go and use another software product if that's your comfort level, you know, but you shouldn't have to keystroke that stuff in. if, you should be able to get it from the government when it's ready. I will note also on the return, they say, this information is going to be accessible, is going to be available by such a point in time. They said they normally get it by July 1st of the year, which is the start of their fiscal year, their tax year. And most of it will be available by July 31st, which is pretty amazing since, we get it January 31st. And if we're lucky, and it's not really available fully loaded until maybe sometime in March. So, I mean, I think that would be just, that the building blocks to those pieces would do a lot for building taxpayer trust. And then, getting them into a system where you could actually, if you wanted to, direct file a return.
Building on what Fred was saying earlier about things IRS is doing well, the irs.gov/account kind of grew up at the same time we were building the va.gov account. And so we were in a lot of meetings and collaborating at the time. And that is so good now. I'm self-employed, so I pay estimated taxes. So I interact with it a lot more than the average bear. And before that existed, I could only pay my estimated taxes under my husband because he was listed first in the mainframe. And the 1 year I didn't do that, I got scary 1980 audit notices, even though I had fully paid my taxes. Now, irs.gov/account is such a slick experience. And Nina, to your point, in the part where you can download, your 1099s, your W-2 information, it looks like a dot matrix printer. That should not require going into the COBOL to make that look a little bit slicker. So that might be an area for some visual improvement. And what are other things we can start hanging on the irs.gov account, because it has, your NIST compliant credentials, increasing number of people already have a credential that works. So you could start hanging more and more taxpayer experiences over there. And the fact that the turbo taxes and et cetera work, like it's possible for that to work well too, right? We have a proof of concept.
Right. Well, and and that also good. You made the comment about the transcripts, and I know that Treasury has said this, that, making the transcripts readable. So it's one, not in machine language, and two, it's not in a code that people need a handbook to translate, what these different lines are, that will take some work. But if you don't want to have phone calls, you want people, if they can get a transcript, they can understand it without making a follow-up phone call to have somebody translate it for them. That's, those are things that have two benefits. They eliminate unnecessary phone calls, they educate the taxpayer, and they just plain help. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? We have questions. Oh, someone did talk about, it sounds like with all the talk of the funding, that, IRA was intended to kind of really handle all this stuff. And now we're saying, well, some of this is not going to be enough funding. And I think that's, this goes back to our tax chat from the week before, where we were talking about, what got put into what bucket, business systems modernization, operations support, enforcement, and taxpayer service. And, I think a lot of the enforcement got put in because it pays for itself and was generating a trackable return on investment. So it was revenue raising. But it also ignores what needs to be there in support of that revenue raising function. And, the IRS is limited in how much it can move things around. And part of what we need to do, and I think what the strategic plan is trying to do, is say, here's the picture of where we need to get. And we'll take these steps, but we still need more. But at least you need to show that you can do something. You can't have a repeat of $4 billion in 2023 money blown,
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I want to talk about, oh, well, Fred, you were going to say.
Well, my comments at the beginning were, I certainly didn't mean to say that the 79.2 billion, whatever, wasn't enough in aggregate. It's the allocation of that.
Right.
As you noted, Nina, and as there was a little bit of a heated discussion even at the thing you were doing yesterday. But there's a reason that the allocation is what it is, and it ultimately ties back to the way that things are scored. And the only thing that would score would be, audits. And so that led to funding to skew to the audits. But the fact of the matter is, you can't make up the tax gap. You can't even make up a small fraction of the tax gap through more auditing. It's got to be through more effective and efficient operations and communications. And, you know, you and I are, I'm sure, on the same wavelength about compliance. You got to make it easy to comply and answer people's questions and all that. That's where the money is. But I think that it's not that the aggregate amount is off, it's that the individual buckets are off. And, you know, and the problem is that, and again, this is where, you know, Ursula was making last week, was making the point that these silos of the funding, whether it's services or enforcement or BSM, that these are actually that these silos actually have fairly strong walls between them. And it's not they're completely impenetrable, but they're fairly strong. And, you know, so the thing that drove the sort of the financial upside of the IRA, unfortunately, was purely the enforcement side. And so to make it have a good return on investment, that's why it's there, but it's not the right allocation for delivering the vision. And that's the mismatch. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough to know how to resolve that. I'm pretty sure trying to raise anything right now in the Congress is going nowhere, you know, but it's a dilemma. It's a very, very serious dilemma. And it's going to, even if they could deliver, you know, a maximum amount for the money they have in these silos, it's going to undermine the overall vision being you know, created.
So let me just ask one question here at the end, which is, and, you know, Marina, you've got experience, Fred, you've got experience, and Dave, you've been auditing this, but obviously the IRS internally is not going to be building all of this stuff. It's going to be working with contractors. And my understanding from the, you know, the 4 billion debacle was that the prime ran away with that contract, among many other things, and that it, you know, oversight was just not robust enough, maybe because there was just too much going on. So how do you build against that risk? I mean, what do you need in procurement? What kind of skills, what kind of oversight do you need to have to make sure that, you know, all your contracts are working together and not against you?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can say one more question, I mean, one more question, how do you also ensure that you're not building in a system that your staff are not getting the skills and the knowledge that they need as well? You know, that you're contracting everything out.
Yeah. I came in the middle of that mess. I'll tell you a funny story. So I had retired around 2000, and I got a call from Commissioner Rosati, who I worked with for many, many years. And he asked me if I could come to the IRS and maybe help out. And I said, oh, so yeah, I guess I could come for a while. You want me to be a consultant? He said, no, we have lots of consultants. We need people on our side. And I think that's the story. I mean, the story is the IRS has to have enough people who have the expertise, the management expertise, technical expertise, the procurement expertise to know how you get and select the best, and have enough in place to be sure that the contractors are executing along the vision, you know, consistent with the vision. And I don't really have any miracle solution, except you have to have enough strength and enough knowledge and enough experience on your side. And I think what happened with the IRS, and this is sounding like I'm patting myself on the back here, which I don't mean to do, but I think that the contracting got ahead of the IRS's ability to manage the contracting. And once that happens, it's very hard to claw back. I mean, I had to end up actually stopping a couple of projects that just got away. I mean, they just were not delivering. The thing about contracting, and Dave and Marina, sure, it's easy to spend the money, but getting the results, and so it requires very, very knowledgeable people and very good management people on your side, or you're going to lose control of it.
Yeah,
Mm.
echoing what Fred said, that was the key, and it's a hard key because you have to have the right balance of your internal people and also the outside contractors. You know, I've worked with some amazing ones, but when you're on the outside, you can't do certain advocacy work you need to do on the inside. An example was like my team led bringing cloud computing to the VA, which doesn't sound like an exciting thing now, but at the time, a big blocker to that was that the IT approval forms that stopped cloud involved questions like, did I, Marina, jiggle the doorknob of the cloud and check that it was locked? Which, spoiler alert, if you try to do that at Amazon Web Services, they will arrest you. Like there were just, but the outside contractor can't change those forms, right? That was my job at the inside. And I had to know enough about the technology to know how to change it. Or our inspector general said you couldn't put the cloud in an evidence bag. And that was a 2-year cultural experience where we befriended them, talked about, you know, how logical access works, really built that. So you need some of the internal people. Probably, honestly, one of the biggest deliverables my IT crisis consulting firm does is we find the person, and they're often like buried, who actually knows how the process works. And they're always like 4 or 5 rungs down. And we're like, great, Adam is the product owner now. Adam is the person that can work with the contractors. Some things we've also seen work on procurement. I mean, you need the internal people, you need the flexibility, like your contract absolutely should not be a 350-page document of requirements. That's going to fail day one. You need room for prototyping, you know, especially as we get into this case management stuff, you know, like whip up a smart sheet and start building out what your case management wants to be, even if ultimately you need to do something later, rather than making a list of requirements in a Word document. And then have, you know, incentive-based task orders. People talk a lot about performance-based contracting. I don't think that's a bad idea if you have the right people inside that can hold them accountable. But a middle ground there can be, hey, contractor, that you can get task order 1. And if you complete that successfully to everybody's KPIs, then we'll get to 2. But if you give, I would say, like, don't award any contracts that exceed $500 million would be probably a good hard rule. And then we need our friends at the GAO and the IG to help keep an eye on things. To keep those vendors who shall not be named from running off with, you know, billions of dollars and saying that the billions of dollars weren't enough to have actually accomplished anything. That's just false, and we've seen that, you know, proven false again and again.
Well, Dave, that's a good lead to you.
Yeah, thanks for that setup. You know, we have this historical perspective, right, looking across the federal government, and all too often, and this sounds simplistic, but yet all too often this is the case, an agency is not sat down and really thought out what they're trying to do. Not just the contract, but what does that education plan look like so that you have this personnel in the workforce with the skills that they need to manage this new technology you're bringing into the workplace. And I think you know, in a situation like IRS, where where their plan is to remove so much legacy, that becomes a very real consideration. I think there's also really seeking to understand and make sure that you understand and can educate around the changes that are going to happen to your staff and how they do their jobs and how they interact with the customer, how they interact with internal customers, how they interact with stakeholders. Because lots of times I think that doesn't happen, whether it's because there's lack of executive sponsorship, or, you know, a project starts and then it kind of builds and it morphs and grows, and all of a sudden you've got this giant thing that maybe is doing things in small parts, but without the kind of necessary coordination that we would like to see. And I think that being mindful and intentional about the changes that you're introducing to your workplace can go a long way to making a big difference about doing it. It takes a lot of upfront energy, not gonna lie. I think probably everyone here on this call in the audience knows that it takes a lot of time and effort to do that right. But I think the benefits that you get by making that upfront investment in time pay huge uncountable dividends down the line once you've got your new system, new technology, whatever the case is, online and operating in your workplace.
You know, it's really interesting you say that. When we were trying to replace our case management system, before we did anything, we had our case advocates who spent their lives in the case management system. And at every single office, we said to them, okay, now put a piece of paper next to your desk. And this had to be voluntary. We couldn't mandate it. And every time you say, I hate when that machine does that, write that down. You know, every time you want to pull your hair out, write that down. And we rolled, they had group meetings and we rolled, it was very, like pen on paper, but it was like we rolled everything up in a spreadsheet from every one of the 74 offices. We saw where there were commonalities. That told us in many ways where we needed to really focus, because that was the day-to-day experience of our employees. And if it was our employees' experience, then it was the taxpayers' experience, because they couldn't get what they needed easily. And it showed up in our requirements and everything like that. But when everybody said, well, why are you pushing so much on that? I had those little sheets of paper that, I could, or the spreadsheets that I could say, well, that's where that one came from. And if you think I'm going to go back to my employees and say, we're not getting it because somebody else is saying, why are you doing, you're wrong. And then the other thing about that was it became the talking points for bringing our employees around to a change. Can you see what the system is going to do now? There's going to be a big learning curve, and we were starting, a year and a half before we thought it was even a prototype was even going to be able to be, rolled out. Now, the downstream of that was the system got stopped. So we did all this advanced work and then there's nothing to show for it, but everybody was engaged in it. But it really taught me, how, that it's not just one thing. It's not just the machine. It's not just this, there's a whole network of stuff that has to work at the same time. So
Say, Nina, could I add just one more thing that occurred to me listening to Dave and Marina? I think another ingredient is what I'll call early issue identification and rapid issue resolution. The early identification, it could be technical, it could be business, but it requires a really good working partnership with a contractor and between the business side and the IT side. But just identifying an issue, I mean, one of the things I found when I first went to government, because I was in private sector before all that, was it drove me insane to go into meetings with 50 or 75 people and try and get anything done. And, here's where you really need to make sure you have the right leadership involved at that point. And that means you've got to have a senior executive from the business side that can make a decision on the spot. I always said, if it wasn't painful for the business to send somebody over to work on the program, then it's not the right person. And you needed to have the right level of IT leadership. And so, because if you're paying a contractor, right? I mean, the clock is ticking. And if you identify a resolution, but don't resolve it one way or another, you're spending the money and not getting anything done. And this is a really, really critical thing in just keeping momentum and keeping going and in efficiently and effectively spending the money that you have to spend, especially in a contractor type environment.
yeah, that's really great. Well, I think this has been very informative. I'm really appreciative of you three being willing to share your knowledge and your experience. I think it's been very helpful to me. I hope it's been very helpful to our folks online. And this video will be up as on our website, and we'll be letting everybody know when it's posted. And stay tuned for our number 4, which is next week, on the employee workforce and the challenges that we have with the employee workforce that's supposed to be delivering this strategic operating plan. So thank you all for being here. This was great. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah.